that's the beginning of the Bugle Horn, which is a piece in the new List A. It's a great fun piece to play. It's called the Bugle Horn because it gives you the kind of the gist of what bugle horns can do. They're valveless brass instruments. It was actually written in 1808. It comes from a book of pieces called the Clarinet Preceptor, which I chose to include in this new study book. And there's a lot of interesting things you can do in preparation for this piece. It's in C major, and because it was supposed to be like a horn, a bugle horn, it only really uses the notes of the triad or the arpeggio. So you can do a bit of practice on C major, arpeggio, and triad just in that low register, because they're the only notes we need. And then you want to do some good tonguing practice on those notes. And just get used to those notes. That's really the first thing to do. From a rhythmical point of view, what I want you to feel, obviously that's the pulse, it's in 2/4. And it's important to feel the subdivisions. So the first time you might play this little game, you're thinking bum, 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 bum. In other words, quavers. Sometimes you have to subdivide into semiquavers. Da, 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 da. That's about the speed it's marked. The crotchet equals 96, but you can do it a little slower, a little faster. It doesn't matter, whatever you feel comfortable. So maybe you might want to improvise just some little rhythmical patterns based on those subdivisions. So I'm thinking that speed now, that's my pulse. I'm just subdividing into quavers, feeling the pulse and using the notes of the arpeggio. Maybe I want to use some semiquavers as well. Da, 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 da. And maybe I can just mix in some of those as well. The actual pattern of semiquavers when it comes to this piece just twice is this. So I might use that in my improvisation. Slightly changed at that time. So I want to get used to these particular patterns. There's only two dynamic marks in the piece, forte and mezzo forte, loud and not quite so loud. But in fact, this piece is a real kind of duet. It has a phrase, and then within each 4-bar phrase, two 2-bar phrases, it's as though there's a little answer. And if you really want to put something a bit special into this piece, you can make that answer just slightly different dynamic compared to the question, the first section. And in fact, one of the great ways of practicing this piece with your teacher, for example, is as a duet. And I want you to work out exactly where each little phrase goes. They all stop at the end of the 3rd quaver beat in the bar. It starts on the 4th quaver, and that exactly adds up to two bars. That's the first phrase. And I want you to feel that punctuation. And so when you play it, that punctuation is there. It's quite subtle, but it's there. And that really makes for a very good performance. And one of the great ways you can do this is actually to create a little duet with your teacher. And I'm going to show you how you might do that just to finish. But before we go there, I've got another interesting instrument here. This is an early clarinet. And this clarinet was actually made, it's not a reproduction, it's a real one, in the year 1806, which was, I think, about 15 years after Mozart wrote his great clarinet concerto, and just 2 years before this piece was written in 1808. And it's quite hard to play, in fact. The sound is slightly softer. It's quite similar. just going to play you a little bit of it. It's quite difficult to play that low G actually. There's no obviously keys. It's all wood, and that I mean keys, rings as we have on the new modern clarinet. It has some keys. It has a key, the B flat key there, one side key there, two side keys down there. Let me just try playing you this little middle section. Squeaks quite easily unless you're really warmed up. Anyway, that's a very interesting old clarinet that this piece would originally been played on, definitely, because this instrument was made just 2 years before the piece was written. But we're going to finish now with a performance, a rather interesting performance that I think you might like to try out with your teacher.